he had a $30 a week allowance while married for 20 years. In this video, I'm going to show you what happened when he finally walked away and why thousands of men over 50 are choosing themselves and building lives that marriage never came close to matching. They're not lonely or bitter, they're sleeping through the night and waking up to a life that actually belongs to them. And later in this video, I'm going to tell you about a man who was homeless for 3 years after his divorce, sleeping in shelters and paying alimony that he could barely afford, and where he is right now will completely change how you think about what's possible when a man finally decides he's done funding someone else's life. And he's not alone. Across this community, forums and kitchen tables where men sit with their coffee in a quiet house they finally own in peace, something is happening that nobody predicted. Men in their 50s, 60s and 70s are choosing themselves, walking away from the entire game and discovering something on the other side that changes everything. Not the sad, empty life that everyone warned them about. Freedom. Real, tangible, wake-up smiling freedom. The man with the $30 allowance? His name is Chad. Within 2 years of his divorce, he paid off a brand new house. Not a mortgage, paid it off. He's now saving 75% of everything he earns. The first thing he told me was, "I feel freaking rich." Not because he won the lottery, not because he got some massive raise, but because for the first time in 20 years, his money was actually his. But first, let's talk about what these men were actually living through, because the before is important. You can't understand what freedom feels like until you understand what the cage looked like. You know the deal. You lived it or you're living it right now. You worked 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week for decades. Not because you loved every minute of it, but because that's what you signed up for when you said "I do." You were the provider, the fixer, the absorber of everyone else's stress. The guy who came home exhausted and still had to figure out what was wrong before he even took his shoes off. You managed her moods, navigated her emotions, tiptoed around landmines you didn't plant, and somehow it was never quite enough. The house was always too small, the vacation was never the right one, the car needed upgrading, and your $30 allowance stayed exactly where it was. And this is what kills me, because I hear this from men every single day. The emotional math was even worse than the financial math. You gave support and got silence. You showed up during her crisis and she disappeared during yours. You compromised on everything: where to live, how to spend holidays, which friends were acceptable, and when you look back at 30 years, you realize about 80% of the major decisions went her way. Not because she was right, but because peace was easier than war, and you'd been trained since birth to shut up and take it. One guy in this community, Tony, he's 70 years old, and he told me something that made me laugh and wince at the same time. He started dating a woman. They got intimate. She's telling him she's a good Christian, goes to Bible study, has never felt this way before, not even with her deceased husband. Real tears, real declarations. So Tony decides to run a little experiment. Tells her he owes money to the IRS. Gone within a week. So much for love, right? 70 years old, and he had to test a woman like you'd test a used car for hidden damage, and she failed the inspection before the engine was even warm. That's not an isolated story, brother. That's the pattern. And every man who's been through it has his own version of it. The moment where the mask slipped just enough to see what was underneath, and what was underneath wasn't love. It was a transaction dressed in a Sunday dress. So what happens when you finally see it? When the pattern clicks and you can't pretend anymore? For some men, it's dramatic. For most, it's quiet. It's sitting in your driveway for 20 minutes after work because your car is more peaceful than your own house. It's watching a couple at a restaurant and realizing you've never had what they have. Not in 40 years. It's your wife complaining about the vacation you can't afford while spending money you earned on things you never agreed to. One of you, a guy who goes by Patignamo, wrote something so clean and precise it stopped me cold. He said in the last 8 years of his marriage, she gradually stopped doing everything for him. Ignored him, neglected him, but still expected him to do 100% of his duties, tasks and payments. After warning her for years, he finally divorced, and now his life, his words not mine, is 1,000% better single. Total peace, total freedom, no drama, and much cheaper, 1,000%. That's not slight improvement. That's not doing okay. That's a man who went from carrying dead weight up a mountain to running downhill with the wind at his back. And the thing I want you to hear, the thing most people get wrong about these stories, is that he didn't leave because something catastrophic happened. Nobody cheated, nobody committed fraud, nobody called the police. He left because the slow, quiet erosion of being ignored while being expected to perform finally became undeniable. The math stopped adding up, and he couldn't pretend it did anymore. Now listen to this, because it's going to change how you think about every man who's made this choice. There's actual biology behind what happens to your body when you finally walk away from a relationship that was slowly killing you. Your stress hormones, your blood pressure, your sleep, all of it shifts in ways that researchers have documented, and the numbers are almost ridiculous. But I want to tell you another story first, because the science means nothing without the human being it happened to. Remember that man I mentioned at the beginning, the one who was homeless for 3 years? His name is Nick. He was married, it ended, and the aftermath wasn't some clean, civilized separation where both parties wished each other well and divided the silverware. He paid alimony for 15 years. Let me say that again because it needs to land. 15 years of writing checks to someone who had already moved on, already moved in with the man she cheated with during the marriage, while Nick was sleeping in shelters trying to figure out how a man who did everything right ended up with nothing. 3 years of homelessness. 3 years of questioning everything he believed about fairness and partnership and the system that was supposed to protect people who play by the rules. And what Nick said destroyed me. He said, now he has friends again, men and women, real friends. Being alone isn't lonely. And then he dropped the line that I keep coming back to. He said, I just got back from a world trip, from homeless to world traveler, from writing alimony checks in a shelter to standing in airports deciding where he wants to go next. And nobody made that happen for him. No woman showed up and saved him. No system swooped in with a safety net. He rebuilt his entire life from a sleeping bag on a shelter floor, by himself, for himself. And the life he built is better than anything he had when he was married and supposedly had everything. That's what choosing yourself looks like. Not the Instagram version where some guru tells you to journal and manifest. The real version where a man claws his way back from absolute bottom and comes out the other side with something no relationship ever gave him: ownership of his own existence. Alright, so this is the science I promised you, and I'm going to keep this tight because you don't need a lecture. You need to understand why your body is telling you things your brain hasn't caught up to yet. When you're in a chronically stressful relationship, your cortisol, that's your stress hormone, stays elevated constantly. Not the normal spike and drop that happens when you encounter a problem and solve it, but a sustained, low-grade flood that never turns off. Your body is stuck in fight or flight, except there's nothing to fight and nowhere to fly, so it just sits there corroding you from the inside. What does that look like in practice? Higher blood pressure, worse sleep, weakened immune system, increased inflammation, and according to the Mayo Clinic, it literally accelerates aging. You're getting older faster because your body thinks it's under attack, and in a way it is. The attack just happens to sleep in the bed next to you and complain about the thermostat. Now this is where it gets interesting. Studies show that partners with higher perceived stress actually elevate their spouse's cortisol for hours after a conflict. You're not imagining the exhaustion. Your wife's stress is biologically becoming your stress, and it's rewriting your hormones in real time. So when Chad says his blood pressure dropped after the divorce, when men in this community say they're sleeping through the night for the first time in decades, that's not placebo. That's their body finally turning off the alarm system that's been screaming for 20 years. And you need to understand what the research misses, because this matters. The studies say men are slightly happier after divorce. Slightly, but those studies lump together every divorced man on earth. The ones who got blindsided and are still grieving. The ones who immediately jumped into another relationship and repeated the cycle. The ones who drink themselves into a corner because they never processed what happened. The men in this community, the ones choosing themselves deliberately and building intentional lives, they're not slightly happier, they're reporting 1,000% better. Total peace, freaking rich, best years of my life. The difference isn't the divorce, the difference is what they did after. So let me paint you a picture, because everyone imagines the sad divorced man eating cereal over the sink in a dark apartment, and I need you to see what's actually happening. You wake up and the house is quiet, not the tense silence of someone being passive-aggressive in the next room, just quiet, peaceful, undisturbed, yours. You make your coffee exactly how you like it, and you sit down wherever you want, and nobody is going to walk in with a problem you need to solve before you've even opened your eyes. Your morning belongs to you. That alone, just that one thing, is worth more than most people understand until they've lived without it. Your money goes where you decide it goes, not where she thinks it should go, not toward vacations you didn't want to take, not toward furniture you didn't need, not toward her mother's emergency that happens like clockwork every other month. Chad went from a $30 weekly allowance to saving 75% of his income. He paid off his house in 2 years. 2 years after 20 years of marriage where he couldn't save a dime. The math isn't complicated, brother. Subtract the person spending your money, and suddenly there's money. Your weekends are yours. No obligations to her family, no events you hate, no performances you have to give for people you don't care about. You want to fish? Fish. You want to work on your truck? Work on your truck. You want to sit in absolute silence and read a book for 6 hours? Nobody's going to interrupt you to ask why you're being so quiet. A 68-year-old in this community, a guy who went through 2 miserable marriages, said the last 9 years of his life have been peaceful, and he actually has money in the bank. 9 years of peace after decades of chaos, and the way he said it, you could feel the relief through the screen, like a man who'd been holding his breath since his 30s and finally exhaled. One guy in this community, Stephen, said 4 words that sum it up better than anything I could write. He said, "I've invested in motorcycles. I've never been happier." That's not a man who's surviving singlehood. That's a man who discovered that his money and his time and his energy, when pointed at things he actually cares about, produce a life that marriage never came close to matching. And the beautiful thing is, the motorcycle doesn't ask him where he's going, doesn't complain about the noise, doesn't suggest he sell it and put the money towards something practical. It just sits there waiting for him to decide when he wants to ride. Now this is the part that nobody warns you about, and if you've already made this choice, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The judgment, it comes from everywhere. Your family, your married friends, women who don't know you but somehow have an opinion about your life, society at large, and it sounds like concern, but it feels like an attack. Your sister says, "Don't you want companionship?" Your buddy at work, the one who looks exhausted every Monday morning because his wife spent the weekend running him through the emotional obstacle course. He looks you dead in the eye and says being alone is no way to live. And you're standing there thinking, "Brother, I'm watching your misery in real time and you're telling me I have the problem." You want to say it, but you don't because you've learned something important. People trapped in cages get angry at birds who choose to fly. Your freedom isn't inspiring to them, it's threatening. If you can walk away and be happier, genuinely, measurably happier, what does that say about their choice to stay? It says maybe they're not staying for love. Maybe they're staying because they're afraid, or because they ran the same math you did and arrived at the same answer but couldn't stomach the leap. Your peace is a mirror they didn't ask for, and every time they look at you enjoying a Tuesday evening with no obligations and no drama, and no one asking where you've been, something inside them cracks a little. That crack isn't your responsibility, but they'll try to make it yours. And the women are the loudest critics of all, because a man who opts out of the market is a man who can't be sold to. You're supposed to be out there pursuing, competing, auditioning for the privilege of someone's company. When you refuse, it breaks the entire model. One guy in this community summed up the whole dynamic in a way that made me spit my coffee out. He described a conversation with a woman where she asked what he brings to a relationship. He listed everything: income, stability, emotional support, protection, the whole resume. Then he asked her the same question, "What do you bring?" And she said without a hint of irony, "Why, me of course." That's the offer, brother. Her presence, her physical existence in your space, and somehow that's supposed to be worth everything you spent 40 years building. One more, because this one's too good. A retired engineer in the community said something that made me actually laugh out loud. He said not giving a damn about how others judge you is the key to happiness, and he discovered that at a young age, while the rest of us spent decades contorting ourselves into whatever shape kept everyone else comfortable, this man was out here living the cheat code since his 20s. Some of us had to lose a house, a pension, and our dignity before we figured out what he already knew. And you need to understand about the biology of this, because it connects to what we talked about earlier. When you finally make this choice and stick with it for 18 to 24 months, your brain literally rewires itself. The old neural pathways, the ones that made you tolerate imbalance, rationalize bad treatment, and keep hoping it would get better, those pathways get pruned. New ones form. Peace becomes your default setting. Self-respect becomes your operating system. And going back would require destroying the healthier version of yourself that you spent 2 years building. Your brain won't let you do it. That's not stubbornness, that's neuroscience. So this is what I need you to hear, and I mean really hear this, because it's the thing that every man who's made this choice knows in his bones but struggles to say out loud. Choosing yourself isn't giving up on love, it's giving up on a bad deal. It's looking at what you invested versus what you received, and making the same decision any rational person would make with any other investment that's been losing money for 30 years. You wouldn't keep pouring into a stock that declined every single year and call it loyalty. You'd call it insanity. But when men do that with relationships, we call it commitment. And when they finally stop, we call them broken. There was a comment in this community from a man named Mind Principles that stopped me cold, and I saved it because it says everything I've been trying to say across every video on this channel, except he said it in 2 sentences. He wrote, "At 25, you call it sacrifice. At 55, you call it self-betrayal." Read that again. At 25, you call it sacrifice. At 55, you call it self-betrayal, because that's exactly what it is. When you're young and full of testosterone and hope, giving everything to someone else feels noble. It feels like what a man is supposed to do. But when you're 55 and you've watched your health decline, and your savings evaporate, and your peace dissolve into someone else's demands, and you realize that the sacrifice was never mutual, never equal, never even close, it stops being sacrifice and starts being something you did to yourself. And the only person who can stop doing it to you is you. Another man in this community, Dar, wrote 5 words that I think about constantly. He said peace is more important than a peace. 10 years without an argument, 10 years without worrying about bills, 10 years of a life that belongs entirely to him. And he's not lonely, he's not pining for someone to come save him from his quiet, comfortable, fully paid for existence. He's free. So what does it actually mean to choose yourself? It means your morning coffee is uninterrupted. It means your retirement account has your name on it and nobody else's. It means when your phone rings, it's a friend asking if you want to grab lunch, not a crisis you need to manage. It means your health improves because your body finally stopped fighting a war nobody declared. It means your kids actually enjoy seeing you because you're not stressed and depleted every time they visit. It means you wake up without dread, go through your day without negotiation, and fall asleep without wondering what you did wrong. That's what these men built. Not emptiness. Not the sad ending everyone assumes comes with being alone after 50. A life that finally, after decades of being divided up and handed out to everyone else, belongs to them. And one more thing, because I know some of you are sitting there thinking, that sounds nice, but isn't it selfish? Yeah, it is. Gloriously, unapologetically selfish. And after 30 or 40 years of putting everyone else first and getting a $30 allowance for your trouble, you've earned it. He chose himself, and everything changed. Not because some magical transformation happened overnight, but because he stopped pouring his life into a hole that never filled up and started building something that was actually his. The house got quieter and his mind got clearer. The bank account got fuller and his blood pressure got lower. The calendar got emptier and his life got richer. Every single man in this video, from Chad with his paid-off house to Nick with his world trip and Tony with his IRS test and Dar with his decade of peace, they all did the same thing. They looked at what they were giving, looked at what they were getting, and made the most rational decision of their lives. If you've already made this choice, you know. You know what that first quiet morning felt like when you woke up and realized nobody needed anything from you. And instead of feeling empty, you felt like yourself for the first time in years. You know what it's like to look at your bank account and see it growing instead of hemorrhaging. You know the feeling of going an entire week without a single argument, without a single negotiation, without a single moment where you had to be someone other than who you actually are. And if you're sitting on the edge of it, scared of what people will think, scared of being alone, scared of what comes next, look at these men. Look at what they built. Look at where they are now. They were scared too. Every single one of them sat where you're sitting right now, wondering if the quiet would feel like peace or punishment. It feels like peace, brother, every time. Then ask yourself one question. What are you waiting for? If this hit home, drop your age in the comments and tell me what your life looks like now. You know what I keep seeing everywhere? Men in their 50s, 60s, even 70s. Men who spent decades in relationships walking away from dating entirely. And when I say walking away, I don't mean taking a break. I mean done, completely, permanently, without any interest in reconsidering. At first glance, you'd think these guys got burned badly. Messy divorce, terrible breakup, something dramatic. But when you actually talk to them, that's not what happened. Most of them had relatively normal relationships. Nothing you could point to and say, yeah, that explains it. So what's going on? The answer they give is always some version of the same thing. I gave everything, she gave nothing. And I'm not doing that again. When people hear that, they immediately assume these guys are bitter, exaggerating. But here's what I've noticed. When these men explain what they mean, they're not being dramatic, they're being precise. And the imbalance they're describing, it's massive. So massive that once they finally saw it clearly, they couldn't unsee it. That's what this video is about, not bitter men complaining. We're talking about men who did the math, literal accounting of what they gave versus what they received. And the numbers were so lopsided that staying became impossible. If you're a man who's walked away and everyone thinks you're crazy, this is for you. If you're still in it but starting to see the imbalance, this is definitely for you. Let's go back to when you were in your 30s or 40s, maybe during your marriage, maybe right after divorce. You were building your career, establishing yourself, becoming the kind of man you thought women wanted. And women in their late 20s, early 30s, they didn't see you. Not really. You were stable, you had a decent job, your life together, emotional maturity. But that's not what they were looking for. They wanted exciting. They wanted the guy with the edge, the charisma, the potential. You were the safe option, and safe was boring. If you tried dating younger women back then, and let's be honest, most of us did, the rejection was swift. You're too old, we're in different life stages, I need someone my age. The message was clear, you weren't enough, so you accepted it. You dated women your own age. You built relationships with people who were supposedly at your level, and you poured everything you had into making it work. Here's what's interesting. Back then, you weren't invisible because you lacked value. You were invisible because your value wasn't sexy yet. The stability, the maturity, the ability to actually be a partner, those things hadn't become attractive to women yet. They were still chasing excitement over security. You remember what that felt like, right? Being completely dismissed by women who would have benefited enormously from being with you. Watching them choose chaos over stability, drama over peace. And you thought, fine, that's how it goes, maybe later. Well, guess what? Later arrived. Fast forward 20 years, you're in your 50s or 60s, and suddenly, women who wouldn't have given you a second look back then, they're very interested. Not just women your age, sometimes women 10, 15 years younger are reaching out. And your first thought is, wait, what changed? I'm older, grayer, less physically impressive. Why now? The answer is uncomfortable. Nothing about you changed. What changed is what she needs. Back then, she needed excitement. Now she needs stability. Back then, you weren't useful to her. Now you are. And here's the thing that nobody wants to say out loud. Being wanted because you're finally useful doesn't feel like being wanted at all. It feels like being settled for, like you've gone from not good enough to good enough for now. That realization that you were invisible when she had options, and only visible now that her options have narrowed, that's the first crack in the foundation. That's when men start asking questions they should have asked years ago. Questions like, what did I actually get from giving everything? Let's talk about relationships like investments, because that's essentially what they are. You put resources in, time, money, energy, emotional labor, and you expect some kind of return. Here's the math most men don't do until it's too late. Calculating the actual return on investment. You worked 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week for decades. Let's say you made $60,000 a year. Over 30 years, that's $1.8 million in gross income. How much of that went to building the life she wanted? I'm going to be conservative and say 70%. That's $1.26 million of your earnings funding her lifestyle. Now, what did she contribute financially? Maybe she worked, maybe she didn't. But even when she did, her income was typically discretionary. Your income, that was obligations. Bills, mortgage, retirement, emergencies. So financially, the ROI is already negative. You invested $1.26 million. She invested maybe $200,000. That's a 6-to-1 ratio. But money isn't even the full picture. Let's talk about emotional labor. You managed her emotions daily. When she was upset, you de-escalated. When she was stressed, you absorbed it. Estimate 10 minutes a day of emotional management. Over 30 years, that's 1,825 hours working a full-time job for an entire year. What emotional support did you receive? When you were stressed, struggling, needing support, how often was she actually there? Let's say you got 10% of what you gave. That's 182 hours over 30 years. You gave 1,825. You got 182 back. Now let's talk about life decisions. Major choices. Where to live, how to spend holidays, what to do with free time. Count them up. How many went her way versus yours? For most men, the ratio is 8-to-2. 80% of major decisions were made to accommodate her preferences. Here's where it gets brutal. In business, investments should appreciate over time. After 30 years, the partnership should be more valuable than at the start. But for most men, the relationship depreciated. Year 10 was worse than year 5. Year 20 was worse than year 10. No rational person continues investing in a depreciating asset. Yet men do it for decades because we're told that's what love is. What we're actually doing is subsidizing someone else's life while ours disappears. I know a guy, we'll call him Robert. He's 57, spent 32 years married. About 6 months after his divorce, we're having coffee, and he pulls out a piece of paper, worn like he'd been carrying it around. He unfolds it and shows me. 2 columns. Left side what I brought, right side what she brought. The left side has 43 items. Income, emotional support, household management, being present for the kids, maintaining relationships with extended family. Single-spaced, detailed. The right side has 3 items. I said, Robert, there's no way. She must have brought more than 3 things in 32 years. He said, I tried to be fair. I gave her credit for everything I could think of. 3 items. The 3 things. She cooked dinner most nights. She decorated the house. She organized social events. That's what 32 years looked like from her end. Meals, decor, social coordination. Everything else? The income, the emotional stability, the stress management, the kid raising, the decision making, the household repairs, the financial planning, the conflict resolution. That was him. He told me he stared at that list for 20 minutes. Because seeing it written down made something impossible to deny. He'd been in a one-person partnership for 3 decades. Most men I know who've done this exercise come up with similar ratios. They brought 30, 40, 50 things. She brought 3 to 5. So what did she actually contribute beyond just existing in your life? She didn't handle stress. She created it, then expected you to manage it. She didn't provide emotional support. She consumed yours. She didn't compromise. She expected accommodation. She didn't maintain the household. She expected you to carry the mental load. She didn't protect the relationship. She could check out emotionally whenever she wanted, and you had to keep pursuing, keep trying, keep working to maintain connection. What she brought was her presence, and somehow that was supposed to be enough. The house you paid for, she lived there. The vacations you funded, she attended. The emotional stability you created, she benefited from it. But contribution, active participation in building something together, that list would have been very short. And the brutal part, she probably genuinely believed she was giving just as much as you were, because in her mind, her presence was the contribution. It wasn't. Not even close. Here's something most people don't understand about male psychology. Men have a biological threshold for one-sided relationships. It's not cultural. It's not learned. It's hardwired. When men are in their 20s and 30s, testosterone is high. That hormone doesn't just drive sex, it drives tolerance for bullshit. High testosterone makes men more willing to pursue, more willing to compete, more willing to accept unfavorable terms in exchange for partnership and sex. You'll put up with drama, you'll chase, you'll tolerate imbalance. Because biologically, you're wired to acquire a partner. But here's what happens as men age. Testosterone declines about 1% per year after age 30. By the time you're 50 or 60, your testosterone is 30 to 40% lower than it was in your 20s. And when testosterone drops, your tolerance for one-sided relationships drops with it. You stop being willing to chase. You stop being willing to tolerate drama. Not because you're bitter or tired, because biologically the cost-benefit analysis shifts. The same relationship dynamic that was tolerable at 30 becomes intolerable at 55. Not because the relationship got worse, because you changed. Your brain literally recalibrated what's acceptable. There's another biological factor, cortisol. That's your stress hormone. Long-term relationships that require constant emotional management, where you're always diffusing conflict, managing her moods, those relationships keep cortisol chronically elevated. Chronic high cortisol destroys sleep quality, increases inflammation, accelerates aging, raises blood pressure, impairs cognitive function. It literally shortens your lifespan. And as men age, we become more sensitive to cortisol. The same stress that was manageable at 35 becomes unbearable at 55. Your body starts sending louder signals. This is killing you. Get out. That's not weakness. That's your survival instinct finally overriding your social programming. There's also the prefrontal cortex development, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and pattern recognition. It doesn't fully mature until your late 40s or early 50s, which means, in your 30s and 40s, you're biologically less capable of seeing long-term patterns. You're more present-focused, more willing to believe it'll get better. By your 50s, your brain is fully developed. You can see patterns clearly. You can predict outcomes accurately. You look back at 30 years of data, and your brain says, based on this pattern, future outcomes are predictable and unfavorable. Exit. That's not giving up. That's pattern recognition finally working properly. So when men in their 50s and 60s walk away, they're not being irrational. They're being more rational than they've ever been. The testosterone that made them tolerate imbalance has dropped. The cortisol from chronic stress has become unbearable. The prefrontal cortex can finally see the pattern clearly, and once biology aligns with reality, there's no going back. There's usually one specific moment, the moment when everything you'd been ignoring rationalizing, suppressing. It all crystallizes into perfect clarity. For some men, it's sitting in the driveway. A guy I know, let's call him David, told me he'd sit in his car for 15-20 minutes after work, engine off, just sitting there. His neighbor finally asked, "You okay, man? You've been sitting out here a while." David said, "Yeah, just enjoying the quiet." And that's when it hit him. He was enjoying the quiet more than going into his own house. His car, a confined metal box in a driveway, was more peaceful than his home. The place that's supposed to be his refuge had become the place he dreaded. He sat there another 10 minutes after that conversation. Because once you realize you hate going home, you can't unknow it. For other men, it's the crisis moment. You lose your job, a parent dies, you have a health scare, something real happens that requires support. And instead of showing up for you, she's annoyed that now her life is disrupted by your problem. You're grieving your father, and she's frustrated that you're not emotionally available for her. You're stressed about money, and she's upset that the vacation might be cancelled. And you realize she's not actually your partner. Partners show up during crisis. She shows up when it's convenient. For others, it's overhearing the contempt. You hear her on the phone with her friends talking about you. Not playful teasing, actual contempt. Talking about you like you're a burden she tolerates, an obstacle to her happiness. And you realize she doesn't even like you. She's with you for what you provide, not for who you are. I know a guy, 62 years old, who told me his moment was simpler. He was watching a couple at a restaurant. Nothing dramatic, just watching them talk, laugh, seem genuinely happy to be together. And he thought, I don't have that. I've never had that. After 40 years, I still don't have that. Not anger, not bitterness, just observation. He was sitting across from his wife and he felt nothing. No connection, no warmth, no desire to even be there. And he realized, if I feel nothing, what's the point of staying? Whatever your moment was, whether dramatic or quiet, sudden or gradual, it changed everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. That moment wasn't the end of the relationship. That moment was the end of your denial. And denial was the only thing keeping you there. Let's talk about what modern women, specifically women interested in older men, are actually bringing to the table versus what they're expecting. Here's the demand side. They want financial security, not help with bills, full security. They expect housing handled, retirement funded, debts paid off. They're not interested in building wealth with you. They want access to wealth you've already built. They want emotional stability. You should be completely zen. No stress, no struggles, no bad days. You're the rock. Your emotions, manage them yourself. They want flexibility around their schedule, their needs, their preferences. They want a partner who enhances their life without requiring them to adjust theirs. They want validation, support, encouragement. Constant. They want you engaged with their problems, their feelings, their struggles. They want respect for their independence. They're not giving up their friends, hobbies, separate life. You should understand they need space and freedom. That's the demand. Now here's the offer. Companionship. They'll exist in your space. That's the primary offer. Their presence. Maybe some household contribution, cooking sometimes, keeping things organized, but not the mental load. You're still carrying that. Maybe sex, but with caveats. When they're in the mood, when they're not stressed, when conditions are right, maybe some emotional support. If you need it rarely and you don't need too much. Look at that imbalance. The demand list is massive. The offer list is minimal. According to dating app analytics, women over 40 messaging men 10 to 20 years older include income and financial stability in their filtering criteria 73% of the time. But when asked what they bring financially, 12% mention contributing, 73% demand financial stability, 12% offer to contribute to it. And here's what older men have figured out. That imbalance isn't unique to dating apps. That's just modern relationship dynamics made visible. For decades, that imbalance existed but was hidden under partnership. Dating apps just quantified it. So when modern women offer companionship and intimacy, men are doing the math. They already paid that price once. The ROI was terrible. The offer isn't compelling enough to justify the cost, not even close. Here's something people don't understand. Walking away isn't just an emotional decision you can reverse. It's a psychological transformation. When you finally leave, your brain undergoes what's called cognitive restructuring. The neural pathways that kept you tolerating the imbalance get pruned. The mental patterns that made you rationalize, excuse, hope, those pathways weaken and dissolve. It's similar to addiction recovery. The old patterns that craved the substance have to be destroyed and replaced with new patterns. Same with leaving a one-sided relationship. The old patterns, maybe it'll get better, or I just need to try harder, get destroyed. New patterns form, I will not tolerate this, and my peace is non-negotiable. Once those new patterns solidify, about 18 to 24 months, they become your new default. Going back would require destroying those healthy patterns. Your brain won't let you do it. There's another factor, identity consolidation. For years, maybe decades, your identity was built around being a partner, a provider, someone who sacrifices. Walking away required destroying that identity and building a new one, someone who prioritizes himself, who sets boundaries, who values his own peace. That new identity takes years to fully form, but once it does, it's stronger than the old one, because it's based on self-respect instead of obligation. Psychologically, you can't go back to the old identity without destroying the new one, and since the new one is healthier, your mind protects it. So when people ask why you won't reconsider, why you won't try again, it's not stubbornness, it's neuroscience. Your brain has been restructured, your identity has been rebuilt. Going back would require becoming a less developed, less healthy, less aware version of yourself, and your brain will do everything in its power to prevent that. You're not coming back because you can't come back. Biology won't allow it. Here's what happens when you tell people you're done. Judgment from everyone. But let's talk about why they judge you, because understanding the sociology makes it easier to ignore. Your married friends judge you because you're a mirror. Your freedom reflects their captivity. If you can walk away and be fine, be better, even, what does that say about their choice to stay? They can't let you be happy alone because it undermines the story they tell themselves about why they're staying. Sociologists call this cognitive dissonance reduction. When your choices challenge someone's worldview, they have two options: change their worldview or attack your choices. Changing means admitting they've been wrong for years. Attacking you is easier. Your family judges you because you're disrupting the social script. Men are supposed to keep trying, keep sacrificing, keep partnering. Men who opt out threaten the social order. Your family isn't worried about you. They're worried about what your choice represents, that men can prioritize themselves over obligation. Women judge you because you're a threat to the deal they expect. If more men start walking away, start doing the cost-benefit analysis, start refusing one-sided terms, the entire dynamic collapses. They need men to keep accepting unfavorable deals. Society judges you because male sacrifice is foundational to how civilization works. Men give, women receive, children benefit. That's the unspoken contract. Men who refuse to give, they're breaking the contract, so they shame you. They call you selfish, broken, bitter, afraid. They frame your choice as pathology instead of rationality. But here's the thing, their judgment is not about you, it's about them. They judge you because your freedom makes them uncomfortable. Your peace challenges their chaos. I know a guy, we'll call him Tom, he's 61, single by choice for 8 years. His sister keeps pushing him to date. Last Thanksgiving, "Don't you want companionship?" He said, "I had companionship, it cost me my peace, my autonomy, and most of my energy. I'm not paying that price again." She got angry, not sad for him, angry, because his answer challenged her worldview. If he's genuinely happier alone, what does that say about her mediocre marriage? She doesn't want him happy. She wants him miserable enough that her choice seems reasonable by comparison. That's what judgment is, other people protecting their choices by attacking yours. So when they judge you, let them. Their confusion is not your concern. Their discomfort is not your problem. You made a rational choice based on decades of evidence. They're uncomfortable because it challenges their worldview. Their discomfort is irrelevant. Your peace is not. If every word of this resonated, you're not alone. You spent years, maybe decades, providing, sacrificing, compromising. You were the good guy, the one who stayed, who tried, who kept showing up. And what did you get back? A tiny fraction of what you gave. So you did something most people never do. You looked at the numbers honestly. You calculated the ROI. You assessed the pattern. You recognized the relationship had been depreciating for years, and you were still pouring resources into a failing investment. And you stopped. You walked away. You chose yourself. Now they judge you. They call you bitter, damaged, selfish, broken. They say you're running from intimacy, giving up on love, doomed to loneliness. But they don't see what you see. What they call bitterness is clarity. You finally understand the imbalance. What they call damage is healing. You stopped accepting mistreatment and built boundaries. What they call selfishness is self-preservation. You finally prioritized yourself. What they call broken is wholeness. You're living a life that respects you. You're not coming back. Not for her, not for anyone who offers the same deal. That chapter is permanently closed, and the people who don't understand, let them think whatever they need to think. Their confusion is not your responsibility. Their expectations are not your burden. Their judgment is not your concern. You gave everything once. The investment failed. The ROI was negative. You're not making that investment again. And that's not tragic. That's not something to apologize for. That's a rational choice made by a fully developed brain that finally sees patterns clearly and refuses to repeat them. You learned. You adapted. You protected yourself. That's victory. Hard-won, evidence-based, completely justified victory.